sometimes I, well, what would you want to do? Or what would you do?
Mm.
And then it's like, okay. And then that gives me some ideas. They used to give me time to think. They might kick something up. It's like, well, they're willing to accept less than I might have been willing to give. You never know, but you got to ask, be professional about it. And like I said, what I've learned is 9 times out of 10, it's no big deal. It's just I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. Yet again, we are back with another week gone by, and it's time for Hard Hat, the CEO. Got producer Kevin here today, and we're going to talk about some client and customer service issues and how to handle those things. Kevin, welcome today. How you doing?
I am doing very well. It was a wonderful holiday week for me. I know it was a wonderful holiday week for you as well. And one of the things that I tried to stay on top of, even through the holidays, was customer service.
Hmm.
And when you and I were figuring out what do we want to talk about for the next couple episodes, I thought a good place to go would be customer service in general. And as much as I don't wish this on anybody, I've been a part of this and I've experienced this. How do you deal with difficult clients? I think those are the two things we could dig into today. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's great. Unfortunately, that does happen, and we're all human. It's just how we handle those things, and um, at the end of the day, it's about taking care of people, and at least the way you think you're going to take care of people. So,
Yes. So I have a buddy who is a real estate investor. And I will tell you, the contractors that he had gave contractors a bad name because their customer service was absolutely terrible. So when you're thinking of customer service, what is going through your head? Are you thinking the old adage, the customer is always right? What's your thought process, Chris?
well, I used to think customers always right, and I've learned that's not really the case. And it depends, and you got to put yourself in the customer's shoes, and see it from their point of view, in my opinion. And still, once you understand it, you might not always think they're right, but sometimes you can figure out a way to make everybody not necessarily happy, but under the understanding that everybody's kind of giving and taking.
Hmm.
And but primarily customer service in general. I thought that's the question you were going to ask. I think communication, whether it be with a difficult client or the best client, is through communication because most people just want to know,
Yeah.
and they're not thinking the worst. I mean, I've had calls where um, my sink is dripping, or a renter, they call me and say my floor's wet, and me, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I got a flood. I get over there and the sink, a little drip underneath the sink. It's like, okay, I can fix this. So the point being is that you don't understand. You just get a small snippet, and your mind automatically goes to the worst. Well, a customer who doesn't hear from you and doesn't know what you're thinking or you're planning for your company or your cruise, their mind automatically goes to worst. Oh, he's never going to call me back, or he's not going to show up, or they took my money and I'll never see him again. That type of thing.
Yeah.
So I think communication, whether it be you or your team communicating, is one of the top things that you can do. Whether it be A for great customer service, and B, if you have a difficult client, it's hard for them to argue when they've got something tangible, whether it be a text or email or just even a phone call. Sometimes that's all they need.
Mm. What's the number one lesson you learned from a difficult client or customer, or I would say project, but that's kind of different. Yeah. What's the number one
Yeah,
lesson you learned from a difficult client?
I would say that 9 times out of 10, you yourself are more worried about it than the customer.
Mm.
Meaning that I gotta make a call, something's wrong, or I gotta fix this problem, or yeah, I gotta return this call from a client, and it's not really an issue. Most people understand, especially if if you're communicating with them, open about it. Um, you got you have good people working for you, but you got a good client, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too, of figuring that out. But most people understand, and you give them, you, you explain, and you give them options. Now, the options makes them feel like they're in control,
Mm.
but really you're in control because you're giving them the options, the ones you've already agreed in your mind that you could do. Which one do you want? And then they feel like they're making the decision, and you say, "Great, let's move forward and continue on."
Have you ever fired a client?
Yeah, yes, I have. Not a lot, but sometimes, boy, it's not. It's a no-win situation,
Yeah.
and you can communicate. They don't understand. And part of it, their expectations are more, and I'll take blame. Maybe I didn't explain myself properly. I don't know. And I got to a point, and then I found that other people at the bank, they were having troubles with them. And when I started figuring that part out, it's just not Chris dealing with this.
Yeah.
Other people are dealing with it too. So I like getting, well, when we do contracts, we tell them up front what you're going to pay. And here's what you're going to get when you pay. And don't pay me any more until I get that part done. And I will not come ask you for any more. And I said, if anybody else does, like any other person that you work with, asks you for more money before they're done with the part, that's red flags. But anyway, so it became very clear that we were never ever going to. We actually did end up satisfying her, but it was very clear that I'm stopping at this point. You paid me for this. I'm going to give this. I already had it listed. I said, here's the things that we've done. Here's things you're going to finish before we're done. What are you going to finish it? No, we're going to stop at this point. I'll give you names people call, but it's not going to be us.
Mm.
And sometimes I said, listen, I can't. I'm losing money, and that's part of I don't know if you're losing money. Well, you're losing money on paper for sure. But listen, hey, I can't go any further. You pay me for this. We're going to take care of that. I think it's safer than paying them back money because that's hard cash coming out of your pocket. If you agree that you've already been paid in theory and you're dedicating your time, now it's only time. And how do you plan to do that to make up at least break even on the situation and get on out while you still can?
Mm.
And it actually worked out well. I see them in town sometimes and they'll wave and it's like, hey. So it's not always the end of the world, but there's just times where you have to say, I made a mistake by even agreeing to this job.
Been there, my friend. Been
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Been there. So
it is what it is.
It is. It is. And again, there's always lessons. And if you can end amicably and things work out that way, I think that's the ideal outcome. You mentioned two words that I want to dig into a little bit. Red flags. What, from your perspective, are red flags when it comes to customers? Is there anything that you see or hear where you start to second guess whether or not it's worth it?
Well, when they call you at all hours of the day, before you even start the job, I mean, you might be in an estimate stage. So set your own boundaries. We talked about that in the past. I don't answer the phone after 6 o'clock. Fine, don't answer it.
Yep.
Or give it to your receptionist or whatever. And you've got office hours, and they can't call between then. So you set your boundaries, one thing. But that's a good key because you always see who's calling in, and it's like, oh, okay. Now some people can be trained. It's like, listen, I don't tell them you don't answer the phone after such and such. I have time with my family. Blah blah blah. Some people just don't understand. The other thing is when they start telling you, well, I watch YouTube, and you need to do it this way. Like, well, if it's that easy, then you do it. Or why are you calling me? And I don't get into. I don't like confrontation. Well, some people say I like confrontation. I don't like causing it. I learned not to. It doesn't do anybody good. Just accept it that that's how they're going to be and draw straight boundaries. The way I handled that particular client, I just listened. It's like, yep, that's one way of doing it. And that's how we do it. And if that becomes an issue, then I say, listen, we have to warranty this job. If we're going to warranty this job, then it's how it's going to be done. And a lot of times that just like, ooh, I forgot about that warranty thing. Are you willing to sign something if we do it this way that I'm not responsible? And they start backing up. It's like, well, maybe this isn't a good deal. It's like, yeah, this is not a good deal. So there's ways. It's more logical. Back when I was younger, I had a tendency to want to get frustrated with them, and that's what people are usually looking for. Somebody who's difficult. Not always. This isn't a blanket statement, but sometimes they just want to argue about something. Something just to. And if you ignore it and make it as much as it might be hard, bite your tongue. How many scars are on my tongue right now from biting it? Just hold it, let it be. And it'll usually just go on because they didn't get the response they wanted. That book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yep.
Agree with people. It's hard to argue with something you agree with. Yep, you're right. It doesn't mean you can do anything. If they feel strongly enough, they'll push it. If not, but know your lines. Yeah. I guess, yep, that's, like I said, that's one way of doing it. Yep, you're right. This is how we do it. And just go on and don't even have to argue with it. Or even you don't even have to say that if you think that's going to provoke that person to continue the conversation. Yep, that's one way to do it and go on. And most people, for the most part, and you're going to deal with those others, but it's just part of it. Um, I have a story. Actually, I was thinking about a story that just come up here a minute. Um, we had a client and we messed up. There's no doubt about it. It was our problem. Wasn't them being difficult. It was just, it was a mistake. They're ready to fire us. And I said, tell you what, if I've been working for you for a couple of years and I made that mistake, would you have fired us? No, because you've shown that you. I said, well, that's kind of what we're in right now. It happened. It just happened at the first beginning of the project, but let me take care of it. Here's what we're going to do, and let me earn that trust that you would have earned if I had done it, been working for you for a while. And most people logically, well, that makes sense. I wouldn't have fired you before. And they calm down, realize that you're going to take care of the problem. I had a client. Well, it wasn't my fault, but plumbing got put in the wrong spot, and but I'm still responsible. I told them, listen, we'll make it right. I'm going to make it right no matter what. Um, just give me a little time. We have reschedule everything, and they were okay with that. And then I said we're going to continue on with this other project, other part of the project. But while we're doing it, we're going to fix this issue. Then we can come back to it. And they were accepting of that. Just give them options. I sometimes say, well, what would you want to do, or what would you do?
Mm.
And then it's like, okay. And that gives me some ideas. They used to give me time to think. They might kick something up. It's like, well, they're willing to accept less than I might have been willing to give. And that gives you some input and some ideas and so forth. And it feels like you're really communicating with them. And not that it's not true. I'm not saying that, but I do feel for them and I understand where their predicament is. This is their project, their home, their whatever you're building for them. And they have expectations and dreams. And then sometimes the other day, the dealer ordered a door wrong swing. They said, what do you want to do? I said, well, I guess we'll just ask them. I mean, we messed up. Well, we didn't mess up, but it got ordered wrong. That's what I've been told. But anyway, the customer said, no, I like it better this way. I'm glad it happened. Great. I was willing to change that door out. He likes it better the way it is. More power to you, buddy. Let's have it.
Mm.
So you never know, but you got to ask, be professional about it. And like I said, what I've learned is 9 times out of 10, it's no big deal. It's just I'm making a mountain out of a molehill.
That's what they say. Are there any like apps or technology you use to help communicate with the customer or client?
Yes, I have another company, Prospect HQ is our online, and it's basically a CRM, a real fancy CRM, which is a customer relations management. And with emails and calendars and all that good stuff, it'll just send reminders out and so forth. Also, it reminds me to do things because I forget, or my team to do something. And we started doing this, well, about 3 years ago, where we send out a weekly, almost like a newsletter, and it depends on how they want. And I say newsletter, it's more of an update where your job's at. Here's what we got done this week. Here's the plan for next week. Or I can't come back to your job until this shows up material-wise. And once it does, we're planning on doing this. I like getting dates when a vendor calls and says, well, something's late. Okay, what do you want to do? I said, well, what can I do? It's late. I don't have any really options to control it other than go pick it up. And sometimes that's a viable option. Sometimes it's not. I said, well, okay, fair enough. What did they tell you? The supplier, the manufacturer. Well, this is going to happen. Well, if you can make that happen, when can it be installed, or when can I get it? And then I'll give a plan. Say, okay, Mr. Customer, you might not want to hear this, but that's not showing up. But here's what is supposed to show up. And when it does show up, here's what we're going to do. And there's more expectation. So they kind of understand that, it's not Chris's fault or your fault that the stuff didn't show up. And hell, I'm probably blaming coronavirus still, if you think about it. But But actually, what the common way it is, this is true too. The common way it is that people aren't stocking items for inventory. It's a lot of cash involved. The just-in-time inventory has been hurt to some extent because even those guys are trying to be lean to save cash. So it's just an ongoing process, and order as early and as soon as you can.
I literally did this. So somebody messaged me earlier, late last week, and said, "Hey, I'm looking for something. How quick can you get it turned around?" And I could probably get it done by Tuesday or Wednesday. I told them Friday.
Yeah.
Because I want the extra time. And I think, to your point, if I tell you I'm not going to be able to install something for 3 weeks and I install it in a week and a half, you're going to be over the moon. Or if I tell you I can do it in a week and a half and it takes 2, you're going to feel like I broke a promise to you. So I think that's really big too.
Well, for subcontract or for contractors like myself, I subcontract some items of our projects. I like calling them in advance, so we always have a slot in the calendar. Don't have an idea exactly, but I have, only 2-3 weeks out. Make sure you got me a slot, and they'll pencil me in. That way, and then you get closer to it. Then you can actually reschedule a hard time. Had an issue one time where, we're really booked. I said, well, remember I called you? Yeah, but this happened. I said, well, I can understand that, but my customer won't understand it. I said, what can we do? And they looked at it and they called me back and they moved it up 3 weeks. They pushed me off almost 4 or 5, depending on how you looked at it. And they moved me up 3. And they said, listen, we think we can get it done sooner because you had a slot, but here's the best we can do. And we can get it done sooner. What do you think? I said, well, if you can get it done sooner, great. I'm going to tell a client the day you're telling me now. And that's all right. Were they happy? Well, I mean, they weren't unhappy because they know things happen. And I tell them up front, that's how it works. That's how construction businesses work. You got weather issues. You got all kinds of things that come up. And as long as you're communicating and knowing what's going on, here's your date. That's what they promised me based on this. And especially if they get it done earlier than that, that's even better.
So communication, essentially communication is
that's really the biggest one. I mean, that's even when you're firing a client, you're still communicating, telling them, here's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And when this is done, we're done, type thing. But don't let them get you over a barrel too. That sometimes aggravates. Get your paperwork in line. A lot of it comes into the contracts. Make sure they're well designed and spelled out. You mentioned earlier red flags. If you know a client's gonna be a red flag, you got to decide then if you want to work with them. But if you do decide, add a little bit extra in, so you can give them a little more extra customer service. They think they're being rewarded, and you already got something built into the price to cover your time or whoever's time it is. Always have contingencies. Add a little extra in for contingencies. That's something you missed, and you don't feel like you don't have to go back to the client and say, I forgot this.
Yeah. Because
you knew you were going to forget something. You've got a percentage built in there. I'm a FHA or Veterans Affairs contractor, and they add 15% contingency, which is, in my opinion, way too much. Now, it's not too much if the client's going to change their mind and do a lot of change orders, but that's even different too, because they ask you when I do the forms and stuff, how do you handle change orders? Well, I handle it cost plus 20%. There you go. And they have to sign off on it, and everybody's happy. And I'm sure that comes out of the contingency agreement with the clients. My dad used to be a banker and do construction loans, and I hear all kinds of horror stories, people going over budget and so forth. But as long as you're controlling your business and controlling the funds that you're getting in advance, you'll be just fine. You can't go out and buy a pickup truck with their money. But
not a good look.
I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there who do concrete know this little trick. Matter of fact, my concrete guy taught me this trick. We always had a pump truck into the bid. Now, what that does is, if it's too muddy, you can still get in there and still pour your concrete. Or because you don't have to wait for the weather to dry up. But if it is dry enough, your concrete truck can go all around the project. You just made that extra money. You don't have to spend it on the pump truck, but you're not delaying your job. And actually, it's going to save us money, but your schedule's not being delayed because of the weather for a pump truck. Pump truck there, put the concrete in, let it go, and now you're ready to come in and start framing.
Okay, last question for me, and then you can freestyle however you want to freestyle. But
Sure.
Have you ever, so it's very clear now that you're big on taking ownership and saying, hey, look, we messed up, we'll make it right. Was there ever a time where you didn't take ownership on something that came back to bite you in the butt?
No, not that I can think of. I
No?
did go ask a lawyer one time. I was tempted, and I had decided what I was going to do. I didn't know if the client was going to like it or not. And he really had no choice once I went. This client, for some reason, just kept bringing up suing. And we weren't even arguing yet. It's like, wait a minute, man, we're not even having we're having just like you and me talking. Well, I don't want to sue or anything. It's like, where did the lawyer come in then? Like, okay. So I have a lawyer on retainer, and I was in there for something else. I said, listen, while I'm here, I want to ask you a question. And I said, here's what happened. And there's nothing wrong, but here's my solution. And based on this contract, what do you think? He goes, you're going well beyond what this contract requires. As long as you're happy. He goes, you don't have to do that. I said, no. I want to feel right about it. I think this is a good solution. And as long as I feel right about it and it was legal, we just went ahead and did it. We replaced all the windows in the house. I called the vendor. I said, listen, this ain't my fault. It's not your fault. It's the customer's fault. It really was. It was like, and I don't even say fault. It was like, what are you complaining about? But he was complaining enough that it's like, okay, I can see why you're complaining, but there's nothing we did to make it wrong. So everybody got together and said, okay, they chipped in, and I'll split third cost with the supplier of the windows. And it all worked out fine. And the client, I don't say begrudgingly, he was happy that we took the time to go in and do the work.
Mm.
I'm not sure he's ever satisfied because it still kept doing what we told him it wasn't going to solve it. But here's what I'm willing to do. And like, leave me alone. I'm done. We have taken care of an issue. There have been times though, you asked about, well, you got to stand your ground too. I said the customer's always right, or not always right. And they're not. That's what the contract comes in. It's like, hey, we might have some miscommunication at the front about misunderstanding, but here's what the contract in writing says. And it's like, here's we signed it. Make sure they sign it. That's important. Here's what we agreed to. And they go, yeah, you're right. And if they can pay extra or something to that effect, give them those options. I talked about options earlier too, and since I guess I'm freelancing now, the had a tub that would not come in. Tub came in, it was damaged, shipping. Sent it back, and I'll be damned, the second one didn't come in, damaged. And what frustrates me is with customer service on some companies is that, listen, I didn't do anything wrong. I need that tub. Why does a broken tub take me 3 more weeks to get? Can't we get a little expedited because it was a mistake? So I'll be damned if the second tub, so the third one that come back and they said it's going to be 3 more weeks. I said, I cannot do that. I said, what is an option that I can give this client that can satisfy them? So what we ended up doing was we found basically did onyx. And it's a nice round. You ever go in the hotels and see that nice? Mm-hmm. That's what onyx is. Anyway, so we ended up giving them that versus a foam tub at cost. Not costing a little more. I said, listen, I can get this in next week compared to 3 weeks. And they knew it wasn't my problem. It wasn't my fault that it came in shipped, but still my problem because I'm still responsible for getting the job up. So I gave it to them at cost. I didn't mark it up. So here, we do this onyx, it's going to cost you $500 more, but I can have it in next week. It'll be a nicer product what you had before, and for $500. And they went ahead and did it. Say, yep, we'll do that, just so you can keep going. All right. And $500 later, no markup, but they got a really nice bathroom, more than they were going to have, and they seemed happy. Didn't cost us anything other than a lot of headache just trying to get it all worked out. But it's that happens.
Par for the course.
No, I think
we cross everything off the list.
I think we've crossed everything off the list. Just do that contract, do that communication, hold your ground when necessary, give them options in advance so they can make the decision that you've already agreed to in your own mind, and know when to say when and let them go if they have to.
Okay, 60-second answer. Make this one short. If you had to convince someone that customer service is way more important than they're currently giving it credit for, what would you say to them in 30 to 45 seconds?
You talk about the issue of clients who aren't happy telling everybody else. It's hard to get a good client who's happy to tell people about how good experience you have. So by a good good communication, good customer service, you're upping the opportunity for a good client to tell somebody else, and you're lessening the fact that an upset client will tell somebody else how bad their service was. So erring on the side of customer service is always a good thing.
Well said. Strong work.
And if you guys want to dive in deeper or something to that effect about how to deal with clients, contracts, and so forth, you can reach out to me and we can dive into that a little deeper at LinkedIn and at Chris Gilman and also Chris Gilman on Facebook. We'll be happy to talk about it, and I can show you some other ideas, and maybe if you have a problem, I can deal with it too. So thank you, Kevin, for today.
Of course.
It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you next week.